Hello, I'm Howie Shareff, and welcome to another show from You Call This Yoga, an educational nonprofit organization that brings yoga to the physically challenged and underserved to improve their life. We've started this internet talk show in January to bring leaders of accessible yoga from around the country and world to share their wisdom, insights, and passions with you, so that we can explore accessible yoga for all bodies and persons. Today, I've had the privilege of bringing on several of the members of Light a Path, a nonprofit organization in Asheville, North Carolina. This is important this week because last week we had flooding in the Raleigh area and we needed to have guests that were on higher ground. So here we have assurance that we're hearing from the mountain while we're down here in the Piedmont. Initially, we'll be having board members Kris and Lisa Sherman on, followed by founder Sierra Hollister. During the show, we invite viewers and listeners to call in at 919-518-9773. You can Skype in at Computers 2K Voice, or you can chat via the chat box on the Nissan communication page that you've probably logged into. Our shows will be recorded and available on YouTube afterwards. Coming back to the Light a Path organization, I was researching other nonprofits in the country after attending the Accessible Yoga Conference. This is a consortium of practitioners and businesses or organizations that are seeking to provide yoga throughout the population, creating a more accessible practice. I came across this wonderful group and was pleasantly surprised that there was another nonprofit in North Carolina. And I imagine if I dig deeper, I'll find others too. But what was very compelling about Light a Path was that it's a consortium of teachers, each with, I sense, their own niche and specialty. Let's check in with Kris and Lisa and find out a little more about how they came together, and then soon we'll hear from Sierra after they start. Good morning, Lisa and Kris.
Hi there, Howie. It's good to be with you. Good morning. Yeah, so Sierra pulled me in. Sierra and I both teach yoga at Asheville Yoga Center. Sierra for many years, and myself for the last 5 years. And Sierra will tell her founder's story, but when she wanted, basically, I think, to magnify the impact that she was able to have on the community, she pulled 4 other people in, 4 other Asheville yogis in, each with different interests and skill sets. And we formed the first iteration of the Light a Path board. So that was in 2014. And we came together as a board. 2 members of the board at the time were already teaching, Sierra with Youth at Risk, and Connie Cody at the Women's Prison in Swannanoa. So those 2 classes, Youth at Risk and for the Incarcerated, were the nucleus of Light a Path. And Sarah and Connie got together and wondered how they could maximize their influence and their benefit. They pulled us into the board, and we sat around in a room once or twice a week for a while, sort of incubating the structure of Light a Path, if you like, sort of dreaming what we would do, planning, and that period lasted for about a year, and then really in 2016 things really began to take off. And 2017, it looks set to kind of carry on that exponential growth.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
And Kris came on a little while after.
Yeah, actually, Sierra had I had moved to the area right around about 3 years ago. So when this organization was really coming together, and I had just she kind of knew my background in trauma yoga, and knew that I had a passion to serve in that way, and they had just completed the pilot program for the youth at risk. Our first youth at risk class, and they were looking for a teacher to take over that class. So I also as a board member, but I am also one of the VitaPath teacher volunteers that offers one of these weekly programs at a nearby high school. And I think that what Lisa shares is really kind of at the heart of VitaPath. It's truly a collaboration. I think that we, what you had mentioned, Howie, about kind of a collection of people with different niches or skill sets. And I think that is important to light a path, that we are keeping a level of openness to what healing modalities are out there, that we aren't the ones claiming this is the only way to heal, that if we do have interested parties coming to us saying, we've been doing this work, we see that it's been effective, that it's important for us, that connection piece, that we are sort of holding the space for us all to work together, which we believe will make our resources spread even further, than sort of being these islands of teachers that are serving. And in that way, it's more sustainable, because I think every teacher sort of has an experience of what kind of burnout can look like, or as rewarding as this work can be, if you're sort of not supported yourself, that impacts the work. So that's another piece of what we aim to do at Light a Path, is be supportive of those who are serving as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, viewers and listeners, if you're a teacher in the community who has questions about service and nuances of building collaborations, we invite you to check in with us, because we have 2 nonprofits on the air and we'd love to bounce these ideas around. And if you're a recipient and was wondering, well, how do I get a nonprofit organization into my facility or group, then we invite you to reach out, because I know I'll be at the Accessible Yoga Conference in a couple weeks, and I can also share your requests and information. But in the meantime, we'll come back to the here and now and appreciate some of the prior experiences, or none, because I didn't have any gross nonprofit experience before starting You Call This Yoga. So Lisa and Kris, how did you experience nonprofits before Light a Path?
I was fairly nonprofit naive myself. In fact, I'd say coming to Asheville is really what started off, my nonprofit career. I lived in London before that, and it's kind of hard when you live in a big city to get a lot of people together around community, I find, just because of the sheer weight of trying to pull people together, and like the physical space and time of a big city. Coming to Asheville was really refreshing in that regard. My own path was through, there's a local yoga teacher here called Michael Johnson, and I could only go to his class so many times and listen to him talk about the connection between being on the mat and action off the mat before I had to get off my asana and go and do something off the mat. And for me, it was via environmental activism. I went to my local Sierra Club meeting and met Kelly Martin there, who was with the Beyond Coal campaign, and basically thought, well, yogis care about the environment. Why aren't they doing anything about it? I'm using myself as an example. I'm like, how can I make it easier to bring activism to yogis and yogis and yoga to activists? I formed an organization called Yogis Beyond Coal, which was involved in getting the local power plant shut down. So I think that's sort of why Sierra had me pegged as a sort of like activist yogi, and that was my only previous nonprofit experience, was just basically, you know, seeing a need, starting something and running it, you know, from the ground up.
And you, Kris?
Yeah, so my experience, as I had mentioned, I had moved here a few years ago, and I don't know if I mentioned that I came from Chicago, but in Chicago, I was involved with a few non-for-profits there, one called Embark that specifically is looking to work with youth at risk in some of the most vulnerable neighborhoods in Chicago. And so again, it's sort of a passion for me. I had always served more on the volunteer side. I have a joke with my partner that when he says, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said, "A full-time volunteer." But that doesn't really pay the bills right now. But it's really where my heart lies in the service aspect of it. So this has been a really great learning experience. This is my first experience on a board, and really working with the behind the scenes versus being the one out kind of administering the programs as a volunteer. And I think it's just really the taking that yogic approach of beginner's mind in what we're doing, that we are constantly reminding ourselves that we are learning as we go, and that the importance of obviously using our intelligence and pulling in appropriate resources, and being wise with what we're doing, but also being really open to that. This is, as you know, Howie, in your position, it's constantly evolving, and we're always asked to wear different hats. And depending on the partner who approaches us, because that's a big piece of our model too, is that we're not just going into these communities saying this is what we think is needed, that we rely on our partners to say, we've been working with this population for decades, and and really relying on their expertise to navigate how we facilitate our programs. And so, yeah, it's always evolving, and we're always learning.
Yes, it's not a static process. I can appreciate that. We've gone through 3 board member transitions in the last year, thinking that we were moving forward, and it became, oh, we have to, as someone said, backfill some of our team even before advancing. So just even having the structure in a variable state is a practice in organizational meditation of staying focused.
Absolutely.
And not wavering grossly.
Yeah.
Well, we have an opportunity to receive a call from Sierra Hollister, the co-founder of Light a Path. So we're going to shift a little bit and tune into Sierra.
Hi.
Hello, Sierra.
How are you doing?
Oh, this is thrilling. This is another plane that we're breaking through and having someone else call in and share their story. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having us on your show. It's really an honor, and we're really excited to share the mission and grow the organization. It has been just overwhelmingly positive. So many people really want to get out into the community and share their gifts. And Light a Path has been a way for them to serve with support and guidance, which is so important.
Well, and I can appreciate the interest of volunteers. How did you develop the relationships with the host entities at first? Because it's not always easy just to get the ball rolling, let alone keep the ball rolling with partnerships. Where did your first partnership happen?
The first partnership happened with a high school in Madison County, North Carolina, and it was really the genesis of Light a Path, but I didn't even know it at first. I had attended a sort of a special awards ceremony at the high school for the kids who are considered at risk. And as I watched the ceremony, a friend of mine was giving me a little bit of a backstory on the kids. And I was really shocked at the conditions some of these kids were living in. And I wanted to do something, and I knew my husband wouldn't let me bring them all home to live with us. And the next thing that occurred to me was, well, I can show up and share yoga. And it was amazing. I didn't know that it would really have any value. And over the course of the year, as it turned out, it had immense value. No one had ever really sat with these kids and guided them into ways that they could feel peaceful and they could feel their strength and their resolve and their resilience. And at the end of the year, I realized that we needed way more people showing up for kids like this everywhere. And during that year, I met Connie Matisse, and she was teaching in the prison for women, the Swannanoa Correctional Facility. And in talking to her about her work and understanding my experience with youth at risk, I thought, we have something here, because one of the hardest things is actually getting in the door. Getting in the door of a high school or a prison or a recovery center, while that is starting to change, it can be the piece that really is discouraging for people who want to volunteer. And understanding that we already had, 2 doors open to us and a handle on how to get doors open, we knew that that would be a critical piece that Light a Path could play for volunteers.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is notable that there was some pathways already open. I also hear that it takes a while to build relationships with the populations, people that have been perceived as outliers or deviants tend to feel that way, and it's not necessarily easy to enroll them. So how long did it take, and it could have been brief, it could have been a while, to engage the high school students once you actually got in the door? And in your sense, similarly for the prison and also Kris, for the risk group that you're dealing with, what's really a reasonable runway to get something taken off? Because some of our programs go very slowly and are sputtering about. Ladies, your thoughts?
Well, my perspective from teaching youth at risk and working with women in the incarcerated population is there's always going to be 1 or 2 souls who show up who get it right away. It's a lifeline. And then the rest of the people are a little tentative, a little wary, but they keep showing up, and the magic starts to happen. And, some weeks you may turn up for class, and in spite of everything having gone really well, there's, hardly anybody there. And that's when you remind yourself that it's not about you, and these people have extraordinarily difficult lives. And you come back the following week, and lo and behold, they're all there. So I believe long-term commitment for the volunteer is essential, and also not judging your performance on how many people are there. Because if you're making a difference in one person's life, hold on to that.
Very valid. Thank you. And Kris, any thoughts to add to that from your launch of special group service?
Yeah, I actually, the program that Sierra is named as that first Youth at Risk program is actually the class that she had approached. That's how I got involved with Light a Path, was to the idea that, basically as an organization, we create these pilot programs. And once that we can sort of prove that there is a need and there's a receptivity, then we can really model future programs off of that. And that's really what Sierra is kind of naming that this first program started. And I think there is Asheville, we've been really grateful, is a very tight, community, and it's a smaller community, so it's allowed in some ways, the program that Sierra's naming, that we do have some allies that can help create those pilot programs, that, for example, we're now looking into a foster care program that will fall under Youth at Risk. And to do that pilot program, we're working with people who we have relationships with already to help us develop, in many ways, to set us up for success. So then we can take that program and it's more likely to be received, in another county or through another organization. So some of that is calculated, and then I think another piece of that is how we train our volunteers, that they are going into these populations equipped with what it is to be trauma informed or trauma sensitive, so that the environment, it feels safe, and it, of course, is going to be more likely for them to receive what it is that we're there to offer. But a key component to all of this work, Howie, really is that volunteer aspect, that not only are our teachers volunteers, it's also these programs. No one's making these children go to these programs. No one's making these populations. It's not mandatory that they show up. It's a key component that they have a choice to go or not to go. And so, as Sierra mentioned, the measure of our success isn't so much how many bodies are in that room. It really comes down to consistency, that we're offering a consistent service, and we're there, that we've committed to that. And if one person comes, then again, it's one person, and we trust that they see that consistency. And then some weeks we'll have 20 people, and that's what it's about to us, is that we are a reliable resource in the community.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's precious, and hopefully our viewers and listeners are taking that in, about consistency and not getting stuck on the numbers, especially on the start. We're going to shift to our first pearl of wisdom, interestingly enough, shared by Kris.
Most situations in life benefit from a calm mind. Being able to relax at will is therefore a physiological superpower. Taking a sharp, deep inhale, the deeper the better, followed by a long, slow exhale, the longer the better, activates the parasympathetic vagus nerve, switching on the relaxation response, lowering heart rate, dropping blood pressure, and calming the mind. Let's try it. Take a sharp, deep inhale through the nose, followed by a long, slow exhale through the mouth. Blow it out. Sharp, deep inhale. Long, slow exhale. Blow or sigh. Inhale deep. Exhale long. 2 more. and then return to normal breathing.
I don't know about you, but sometimes I meet two people at the same time and confuse them. And I met Kris and Lisa at the same time and must have technologically confused them, because that was Lisa sharing a little bit of grounding and breathing. And that's my bad because I mislabeled their pearls.
It's fine. We're hive mind.
Yes. And also, I needed to breathe after realizing that, oh, I made another mistake. So thank you for allowing me that opportunity to be with that quote error and realize, well, it's still a pearl. It's just not in the ideal strand. So viewers and listeners, hopefully you've had a chance to settle in a little bit further and get your breathing to a point that you're even more relaxed than before. And hopefully you're considering that you have questions for our guests, whether it be Sierra, Lisa, or Kris, maybe even myself, or I'm not even, about how to manage service in the community. If you're looking to be part of a nonprofit, if you have any questions or concerns about that, we have team here who are experiencing volunteerism. Myself is also a volunteer. I get to be supported in what I'm doing economically through family and other channels, but I live as a volunteer, and that frees me up from some pressures of monies. It's good to have some, but it's also good to have that channel of life where you're giving back to the community, which is also very enriching. Keeping to the pattern that I hope we have, I would like to show Kris's pearl of wisdom and help us to get back on track with what it means to engaging special populations.
Focus on creating consistency in your sequences from each week. This develops safety and trust between the students and the teacher because the students know what to expect each week. This kind of predictability is critical for the populations that Light a Path works with. Other ways that we train our teachers to be consistent is by showing up at the same time each week, by setting up their classrooms in the same way each week. And some of them even wear the same sort of yoga uniform each week. Again, creating a predictability which is a safe environment for these students. Thank you.
So going to the old adage, consistency is the key to greatness. You can tell our show is still working on greatness, but that's okay. We're going to shift back to our guests. First, we'll see if Kris has anything to add to that concept of consistency, and also Lisa and even Sierra on some comments about breathing and settling in. Any thoughts, Kris, to add?
One thing I think just to kind of take, we're always as yogis, I think, talking about the micro and the macro and relating these two experiences from what I shared in that pearl was more from a classroom setting. But I think as an organization, the mission or the idea behind Light a Path as well is that we are creating a level of consistency that our partners and our outside organizations can come to depend on. And so as much as Sierra named that it can be frustrating for volunteers to find organizations to work with, it's also, I think, vice versa, that organizations who are seeing how effective yoga and these other somatic therapies are in assisting and supporting their populations, that then they may not know where to find a qualified or trustworthy practitioner or teacher. And so that's really where our organization is also aiming to fill that need and build that level of consistency with our qualified teachers and what we're offering. So that's a big part as well.
Valid. Thank you. It's important to have consistency on several levels, which I can appreciate is not easy if the marketplace or the relationships change and we'd like to be engaged, but sometimes it may be inconsistent with our patterns too. And Lisa, how about the breathing? Any thoughts of that as an organization as well as an individual?
Well, I think my sort of intro says it all. There's pretty much no situation that doesn't work better with a calm, settled mind. Whether you're walking into a board meeting to try to get stuff done, my experience is that anywhere that there's more than one human gathered, that there will be differences of opinion and thorny issues to be wrestled with. And again, these really benefit from like everyone being able to kind of like step back, settle their mind, and what's the word, respond rather than react.
Mm-hmm.
So or whether if you're going in to teach, being able to have your a settled mind is just as useful. So I think it's a pretty universally useful skill.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to see if we can blend in with Sierra and ask Sierra a question, because on looking at the Light a Path website, the term connection creates resilience as the message. And as an entity or even as a person, it's important to have a consistency in your message. So I'm going to ask Sierra to explain how connection creates resilience as a brand builds relationships. Sierra, you still there?
This is a great one because we as a board have discussed how our mission statement, connection creates resilience, is somewhat open to interpretation. And I personally really love that about the mission, and I love that it is just a massively huge umbrella. Rather than having a mission statement that mentions yoga or mindfulness or anything specifically, we are focused on the connection. And so, to me, one of the most powerful aspects of connection creates resilience is something we've talked about already. Kris mentioned it. And it's the connection of the volunteer showing up week after week consistently. That's a connection right there. And then as well, what the volunteer is bringing, which is the ability to connect to the self, to connect maybe to the breath, maybe to the practice of yoga. We also have running programs, strength training programs, somatic therapy programs. There's even a pottery class in the works. And so it's all these ways of connecting with the self, which of course is, the key to resilience.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Wonderful. I'm going to open the lines to our viewers and listeners. Have you ever been a volunteer? What helps you tick as a volunteer? What gains do you like to experience as a volunteer? And what recommendations do you have for nonprofits like ours to help inspire and retain you as a volunteer? Because we're always recruiting, whether it be backfill or forward development, or even new relationships. We hope that your insights will help us all grow. Speaking of insights, also how we nourish ourselves is an important factor in how we grow. we're going to move to our Fun and Yum Good Health tip and explore how our sponsor, Neomond, fosters good health.
Excuse me, can you tell me about the Neomond food here?
Why, sure. I'm going to have a sampler of 4 items. That'll help me. So why did I get this? Well, let me explain. The Mujadara has cumined lentils, which are absolutely scrumptious. The cumin also has great elements of antioxidants in helping your blood health. The lentils are great protein sources and minerals. The kale is packed with vitamin C and other nutrients, and also the salad has peppers, apple, and tomato. No, that's a raisin. Haha. I love the lasagna. However, it's a vegetarian lasagna, so there's no gluten in there. It uses potatoes, so you get a little blood sugar burst, but oh, the flavor with the eggplant in there too, and the cheese. And then the hummus, of course, being made from chickpeas, is lots of protein and minerals, and the olives and oil give it that extra special sweetness. I also have a little lemon in my water to get a little citrus and help with digestion. Let's chow down. For fun and yum, come to Neomond. That was my twin Harry, who goes out in public while I stay here in the back rooms milling away. So we want to thank Neomond and allowing me to be their guest actor. Those were real foods that I do enjoy. There were so many choices there that I had to pick 4 and didn't have time to get into dessert because that's a whole nother commercial. So thanks, Neomond, for supporting our show and building connection with the community. Let's get back to our community here on the air and around the country or world. Lisa, when you joined the organization, what was your anticipation of being on the board? What were you looking to see happen?
I think I'm just one of those people that tends to go, "Oh yeah, I can do that," and pick things up. And I don't know whether that's naivety or arrogance on my part.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of a structural sort of organization person. That's just sort of in my personality. And I have in the past in different ways, brought teams of people together in lots of different contexts. So I think my sort of skill set is to bring the structure together and to create organizational systems so that the structure functions better. So I think those are my kind of superpowers when it comes to kind of groups of people, so I think that's really important in boards where people are not. If you're in an organization where people are employed and there's interviews and all that kind of stuff, then there's a kind of clear sense of who's going to be in charge of what already. But in a board situation where often it's like just pulling people in on a more intuitive basis who you already have a connection with. I just tend to filter myself to be the one that like is the structural organization connection type person and running this system. So that's the joy and the curse of being a person with a mind like mine.
I can appreciate that because one of our organizational challenges has been to develop a more defined structure and clarity within, as opposed to many, quote, committees just merging into a whole mosaic of an entity as opposed to a clear, crisp sense. But then some of the challenges I expect is if you have a structure, how do you build growth into the process? How do you plan for that without weakening the structure or getting chaotic? Any
Yeah,
any
it's a
thoughts?
good it's a good question. I think not too much rigidity in the structure. You know, the structure has to be evolving and flexible, and you know, there has to be room for organic growth in the structure. So my most recent sort of conceptualization of the structure of Lightapath, I was thinking we've been bringing on new board members, so I've been thinking a lot about explaining how it is that we function and what it is that we do. And I was looking at traditional structures of organizational management, and they're all kind of like very kind of top down. You know, you've got the CEO, and then you've got the board, then you've got people kind of underneath them. And I think it was like one of those things where you sort of wake up in the middle of the night or like early in the morning, and I think, oh no, it's actually the opposite of that. So we have a board at the bottom, and the board supports program heads in each of our 5 areas of interest, and the program heads support the volunteers, and the volunteers support the students. So it's actually like a lotus. It's actually like a flower that comes from the bottom up. And now we also have an admin person, and Kris is actually taking on the role as being our admin person. So she's almost the node at the bottom. She supports the board, and then the board supports the program heads. The program head supports the volunteers, and so the board has to be a very strong and stable structure, because it's from that structure that the branches, you know, the roots and the branches. So we have to have strong roots, and the board is really kind of like the roots, and the volunteers and the students that we help are the branches. So that's my best visualization of how it is. And you know, plants and flowers have both solid structure and the ability to grow and change. So I guess that's my metaphor for now, at least.
Beautiful. And Sierra, how do you envision some of this board structure and negotiating the ambition of exponential growth?
Well, I totally love Lisa's vision and am on board with that. And to add to that, the board, we have a very hard working board, and we're all about supporting growth. I don't know about exponential growth, to be honest. My vision is we get to a point where Lightapath is not necessary. Everyone is kind and loving to each other, and we all understand how to tap into the peace and the calm within. So that's the vision I hold.
Thank you. I appreciate that clarity. So in terms of the board is supporting the teachers, and the teachers are supporting the students or the recipients. How would you go out and develop a new relationship, or does the relationship have to come to you?
Yeah, that's a great question, Howie. I think that initially, as Sarah had mentioned, I mean, it really was that grassroots effort of her seeing a need in the community and filling it, and then, sort of realizing that there were many other, what we kind of call these little islands of teachers that were doing the same. But then in the last few years, through the effort of Lightapath to really consolidate and have us all working together. So again, that idea of connection creates resilience, really starting with the organization itself, that we must be connected and we must be resilient to even be able to serve from that place. And now it's pretty exciting, Howie. I mean, in the last 6 months alone, we've doubled our programs, and we've actually been on the receiving end of like the county reaching out to us saying, we've identified you all as a resource and we're looking for X, Y, and Z. And so we're actually now, you know, and we're pretty excited about that. Have built a reputation around what we've been doing enough that we're being solicited by others rather than having to only go out. And of course, that's also still happening. We still have our program heads. One of their main responsibilities in those 5 areas of youth at risk, incarceration, unhoused, recovery, and our low-income community programs, that we are always, you know, we are still developing programs as much as we are, you know, answering the call to those that are identifying us as having a resource that they need. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. It's interesting to look at how we can engage and also discern if this is a worthwhile path with a partnership or if it takes us too afar, because we surely like to say yes when an inquiry comes in, but we also have to honor our structure and not strain our system just on the ability of saying yes. So with that, do teachers have to be yoga teachers to be volunteers, or to be a volunteer, do you have to be a yoga teacher?
No.
That's a great, yeah. If Sierra wants to take that one,
Yeah, no, they don't have to. We do so much more than yoga. We are starting up Zumba and hip hop. For someone to volunteer, they really just need to have a gift to share. And then depending upon the gift they want to share, are there certifications that go along with being knowledgeable in sharing that gift? And we look for that. We look for long-term commitments. Ideally, someone is able to offer a year of their life. In some cases, with some populations, we drop that down to 6 months. And we also ask for references so we can do due diligence on our volunteers, know who we're sending out there.
That makes sense, too. I know I've been receiving information on how to screen volunteers. And just because someone is interested and passionate doesn't necessarily mean that they're the right person for our organization or our missions.
Right.
This is true. And if you don't mind me just adding a little piece to that, Howie,
sure.
That Sierra did a great job of describing that, you know, we are not pure, it's not just yoga that we are offering, but even in the context of like the original question of do you have to be a teacher, we are now seeing that we actually will receive applications from people who they maybe are a teacher or they're a recent teacher, and I think that, you know, of course they've been moved or impacted by yoga or what it is that they want to offer, but they may not necessarily be ready or feel comfortable to go into that population, or we may have realized through our orientations and our training that, you know, that we don't really have a placement that is a good fit, as you were saying. But what we've found is that, again, as Sierra mentioned, when there's a desire to serve in that way, we've been lucky that we've found a way for them to serve. And so to be more explicit with that, what I mean is, like, we have a volunteer who has photography skills. And even though she's a newly trained yoga teacher, she's realizing, I don't really feel comfortable teaching, but I want to serve. And so now she's come on board as a volunteer who helps us with our promotional material and is taking photos. So again, that idea that Sierra said of having a gift and a willingness to serve, we really, up to this point, feel confident that we're able to find a match. And sometimes you're right, Howie. Sometimes it's not a fit, and it comes back to that idea of taking care of the organization, coming from a place of that micro level of impacting the macro level and needing to keep us healthy in order to do what we do.
Yes, an organization is an entity in itself that requires nurturing. And speaking of nurturing, we're going to move to our third pearl from Sierra, who will give a little demonstration on ways to take care of yourself in a simple way.
I'm sharing cross crawls with you today. One of the easiest ways to activate brain development and boost the nervous system. Super easy to incorporate in your yoga practice. Cross crawls happen naturally when we walk, when we run, when we swim, and when we're babies, before we crawl, we're moving in a homolateral pattern. And that simply means that the right hemisphere of the brain is controlling the right side of the body, left hemisphere of the brain is controlling the left side of the body. Once we start to crawl, we activate the contralateral pattern of movement. And this is the pattern that's essential for brain development. So populations that maybe didn't get adequate development as a child or development was impaired can benefit from this, as well as populations that have suffered trauma. Trauma can really affect the way our brain and nervous system function. So to do cross crawls in your yoga practice, my favorite way is simply lifting opposite arm, opposite leg, just like this, super easy. But not everybody can be on their hands and knees. So another way is to do it just like this, standing. The important thing to keep in mind with cross crawls is it's not about speed. You receive greater benefits by lifting higher and moving slower. It requires more precise control. The benefits of cross crawls include greater focus, reduced stress, overall healing, increased energy, and most importantly, whole brain development. Thanks.
Whoa. 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 My brain's on fire. I'll put my sandals down for now. This is a serious show. Sometimes. But what Sierra was sharing is an important developmental process, not only for brains that may not have developed fully, but also brains that are on the decline. And who can't say that they're getting a little spacier each day? All right, you can all put your hands down. Thank you, Sarah, on that pearl. Ladies, what has the response been to Light a Path in the Asheville or Buncombe County or even that whole region of North Carolina? How have other entities besides the municipalities responded to Light a Path?
We've been showered with abundance, I would say. Starting with sort of more obvious partners, pretty much all the local yoga studios are donating used mats to us. And we also have what we call a transition pass, which enables people who have been incarcerated to practice at 7 local yoga studios for free. And that's been very, very successful. And then, individuals are very, very keen to support. We've had people offering financial donations, of course. And then we also have some corporate partners that have come in and helped. Lululemon has really helped. They have their own grant program that we're approaching them about. But just the local Lululemon store has been really instrumental in connecting us also with New Belgium Brewing. And New Belgium Brewing has run a series of weekly yoga classes for us last fall, and again starting on Thursday actually. So it's a 6-weekly series taught by a different actual teacher each week, and all proceeds are going to Light a Path. And then, as Kris and Sierra have mentioned, then institutional partners have started to approach us as the strength of our reputation starts to spread. So we're kind of sucking on the fire hose of abundance at the moment, which is a great position to be in. And also it really calls on us to create that strong, stable foundation of structure and systems so that we can not be overwhelmed by that abundance, so that we can maintain the commitments that we already have made, and also start to take on new offerings as they come towards us. So that's the joy and the terror of being at this stage in the life cycle of our organization.
Well, that's the good news, right? Is having more to manage than less to manage, and trying to foster that. So what we're hearing is that there's ways that the community can get involved in small steps, but that they're significant. Just hearing that there are 7 yoga studios willing to accept your relationships into their fold is pretty incredible in itself. Not to say that all communities are having disparities with bringing the atypical yoga student into the studio, but it just seems rather significant that Asheville has embraced your mission, and that's rather wonderful. Speaks highly of the other studios there.
I think also it goes both ways. It's not just that the yoga studios are opening up to non-typical students. It's also that sometimes the doors of a yoga studio are a kind of a high threshold for non-typical students to go through. So the invitation really works both ways for those students. If they feel like the studio is already going to accept them, then like the bar to them going there is much lower.
And as a nonprofit organization, how could people support you?
Well, there are it's a great question, Howie. There are many ways to support us. I think that we've, really emphasized that the work we do can't be done without our dedicated team of volunteers. So we've named as sort of a strength having this strong community of yogis in Asheville, and being a smaller community has been helpful. And at the same time, of course, we can see that as we continue to grow and there's more partners that are needing our programs and services, that we will need more volunteers to fulfill those requests. So we're always seeking new volunteers, and that's information you can of course find at lightapath.org on how to get involved. We also have that there's a need for financial contributions, of course. So whether it's just donating online, we're set up for that, and also, as Lisa had mentioned, through these events that are fun in the community. Of course, Howie, I love your fun spirit, and I think that has to carry what we do, that this has to be enjoyable and fun. It is very serious work, but there's this element of like, come to New Belgium and take a class with everyone, and if you throw a little money in the jar, that is paying it forward, so that someone else who may not have that opportunity can be connected to some of these resources. And then a big initiative for us right now is actually seeking more sustainable financial streams. So through grants is a big push, and that's Lisa was a little modest in what she does for the organization because she's also spearheading sort of our research on actually measuring how does connection create resilience and what is the efficacy of our programs. So just there's so many ways to support Light a Path, and it's not just that financial. It may be that someone has background in grant writing or grant research, and that's the way that they can support our work. So really that openness remains true for us, that if you feel compelled by our mission and what we're doing here in Western North Carolina, absolutely, it's just being willing to connect, to reach out to us, make that connection, and that's the best way to support us.
Beautiful. So in summary, viewers and listeners, if you have questions about nonprofits that relate to yoga, feel free to reach out to the Light a Path team through their website, where you can also make a secure donation. You could reach out to our organization, You Call This Yoga, at youcallthisyoga.org, and explore more through reaching out or in your own community, and we love to be a resource for you now and in the future. Thinking ahead about the future, we do have Lee Albert on next week. Lee Albert is a positional therapist where he guides people into an alignment-based practice to help relieve some of the maladies of life. Lee Albert next week, who teaches at Kripalu. So do tune in at 10 next week. We also like to thank Neomond at neomond.com, where if you click on Explore, you could see the Neomond Minutes and other special sponsor spotlights. We are in great appreciation to the Light a Path team of Sierra Hollister, the co-founder, Kris Moon, a teacher and board member, and Lisa Sherman, a board member and special community liaison, etc. Thank you, ladies, for being part of our show. Viewers and listeners, please rate our show and tune in next week. Thank you all. Namaste.
Thanks, Howie.
You're tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section on nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Atomos.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.